Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining with us this morning. Senator Devlin and I are here to present what we're calling Oregon's Turning Point Budget. And with your indulgence, I'm going to read the preamble. As we recover from the Great Recession, we need to reinvest in our state, as well as have strategies to respond to whatever might happen in the economy, the courts, or the U.S. Congress. We're asking Oregonians from all walks of life to join in the effort to revitalize our schools and give our kids and teachers the resources they need to thrive. We're asking our colleagues in the legislature to stretch themselves in their ability to strategically reduce both budgets and tax breaks. We're asking retired public workers for a reduction in their yearly cost of living increases. We're asking current public workers for even more effort as we climb back to fiscal stability. We're asking the public and the business community to work with the legislature on targeted tax expenditure reforms. We acknowledge that our targets for both PERS savings and reductions in tax expenditures have uncertain paths in the legislature, but we believe it's our obligation to present to the legislature and the state as a whole a framework for recovery and reinvestment. This is the turning point for Oregon. With this budget, we can finally bring back opportunities for our students, provide health care for 220,000 Oregonians while bringing down the increase in health care costs, and make a vital investment in mental health services for our state. We can boost economic development tools needed to push our economy forward and get more Oregonians back to work. Senator.
The cornerstone of our budget, and actually the turning point, is what we are going to be doing in education, along with the recognition of what we have already done and will be doing in human services, particularly in healthcare. The funding level for K-12 for the state school fund is $6,750 million. Again, $6,750 million. That is a combination of new resources and saving. The direct appropriation will be $6,550 million. Again, $6,550 million. The savings from PERS reforms and adjustments will be approximately $200 million. To total the total of $6,750 million. We all know that we cannot afford for our schools to lose any more teachers, to lose any more school days. So we are looking at this as a turning point of investment in education. In other areas in education, we will be at a minimum funding our university system at the levels recommended in the governor's budget for both the university system, the Community College Support Fund, the Oregon Opportunity Grant Program, Head Start and Early Intervention, Early High Childhood Special Education programs, as well as we will be adding money back to address the shortfall in OUS statewide, sports lottery, skill centers, and the issue that has been discussed in terms of rural schools.
In every other area of the budget, we're going to be asking our subcommittees to seek targeted levels of reduction in each area of the budget in order to meet our education goals. In the past 4 years, we've had significant budget cuts throughout the board. We're not going to ask the subs to go as deep as they've gone before, but these are difficult and challenging cuts. In the Oregon Health Authority, our budget assumes the revenue from a renewed hospital self-assessment and funds from the Tobacco Master Settlement. We also do support the governor putting in additional dollars for mental health into his budget. We support that, particularly in children's mental health services, services for teens and young adults as well. We're going to try to push the sub to find areas to reduce, but to maintain that increased investment in mental health services. In addition, we are expressing our concern with the impact of the closure of the Blue Mountain Recovery Center in Pendleton, both in regard to jobs and mental health capacity in that region. For the Department of Human Services, our budget restores TANF eligibility that had been cut in the governor's budget. And we share the governor's goals in many other areas. He's mentioned staffing levels as a concern. We're going to ask the subcommittee to focus on staffing levels statewide to make sure we're taking vacant positions where they are available to increase our ability to have frontline positions in child welfare and other areas.
In public safety, we are going to depend upon the work of the Joint Committee on Public Safety and our subcommittee Ways and Means on Public Safety for reductions and reforms. We will be asking that subcommittee, to look for targeted reductions beyond what the governor has talked about in terms of his savings. We believe that can be done without any without any harm to protecting the public safety, either in their homes or their communities. And we believe that those budgets should have the same review as they would normally have. I believe probably most of our additional reductions will probably be in the area of the Department of Corrections, but not all of them. In the judicial budget, we are providing an additional $13 million beyond the governor's recommended budget. We will believe this will help the courts to stay open 5 days a week to meet all their requirements. We believe the judicial branch will believe it's still a little bit short of what they need, and we believe with their cooperation there may be a way to get a little bit closer to where they want to be.
For natural resources, we see the governor's proposals for natural resources to be the best budgets in this area in many years. We're committed to try to maintain those levels to the greatest extent possible. We'll work with the subcommittee to do some targeted reductions in order to get general fund back to the education area. But again, we strongly support the main thrust of the proposals in the natural resources area. Transportation economic development, our budget includes increased debt service for the state radio project. With the economic development proposals from Business Oregon, our budget is slightly reduced from the governor's. Several of the initiatives he put forth we don't see as being pretty fleshed out yet. So we're asking the Transportation Economic Development Sub to review those proposals and to make sure the dollars we're investing into Business Oregon and the various economic development programs have the greatest potential for job creation. With the governor's proposal to put community housing and housing and community services into a special purpose appropriation for the second year. It's a little wonky that we're getting into now, but he actually asked for the chance to restructure that agency to put their second year budget into a special purpose appropriation fund. E-board, we're glad to do that with him, but we are going to make sure that we do a 2-year budget for the budgets that are under the umbrella of that agency. So things like CASA or the food banks or low-income housing will have a 2-year budget while the structure of that agency gets reviewed over the next 2 years. In the general government subcommittee area, we are seeking a small level of reductions, no red flags in that area from where the governor has left us. For tax credits, our budget includes the funding necessary to maintain current levels for the earned income tax credit, for the farm workers housing credit, for the political contribution credit, and the cultural trust credit. Expansion of these or any other credit, including the film and video credit, must come from reductions or eliminations of other current credits or other sources of new revenue.
The governor included many new initiatives within his budget. In fact, if we were to discuss all of them here today, we would need another hour for this press conference. However, we are going to highlight some of them we are supporting and identify one which we are not. If we do not highlight one of his initiatives, it doesn't mean that it will not be in the budget. It means that we particularly wanted to highlight some of his initiatives that we clearly support. In education, he has initiatives for Oregon Reads, Connecting to the World of Work, and post-secondary aspirations. We support those initiatives. The amount of funding they will receive, though, will depend upon the further elaboration we receive from the executive branch on what will be accomplished with these funds, how we will be able to measure those accomplishments, and dependent upon what our total resources are within the budget. The one area in the education budget that we particularly want to call out that we are not supporting, and the governor understands this, we are not supporting the $120 million being taken from ESDs for regional centers for teacher preparation. Not that we do not believe that this is not a worthwhile purpose. It is a very worthwhile purpose. And I think people will continue to work in this area, probably for looking at lesser dollars than what the governor identified. But those $120 million largely go now to meet the needs of special needs children, and we have no replacement for that funding. In fact, if you all pay attention to the news, some of the funding in that area has been sequestered. So we may be facing a slight issue that we did not necessarily anticipate. But we are not supporting that initiative.
In the healthcare and public safety initiatives, probably no surprises, we are in agreement with the funding proposals in the governor's budget for the initiatives for coordinated care organizations and the hospital transformation effort. In public safety, again, we're looking to the Joint Committee on Public Safety to complete its work in a timely manner, to get back to us with what reforms they will approve and support, and to be able to use those savings from those forms to balance the public safety budget.
Now we will move on to the co-chair's proposals on PERS reforms and savings. For us to actually enact PERS reforms that will be upheld by our courts, it's similar to actually trying to thread a needle. Actually, it's trying to thread a needle in the dark, because we have so many court decisions already that are so restrictive in what we can do. We have to figure out a path that we believe is both fair and will result in long-term and short-term savings and long-term stability. What we will attempt to do is to do both a COLA, and we will end the out-of-state assistance for retirees that are out of state. Our COLA will be approximately at a level of about $400 million in savings, roughly somewhat over $2 billion in terms of its saving over the next 20 years. The COLA will be graduated in all probability, because what we are hearing from our counsel, and I'm taking by our counsel both our legislative counsel and the Attorney General's office, and actually the numerous parties that we are consulting outside the building, along with actuaries and everyone else, is that to have a COLA that will survive judicial scrutiny, it will probably have to be graduated. We also obviously are including the $55 million in savings for out-of-state retirees. What this basically means is when we came into this building, long before we came into this building in reality, we anticipated about a 4.9% of payroll increase in PERS costs for all public entities on average. That includes not only state agencies, but it includes school districts, it includes counties, cities, and special districts. This $455 million savings will address about 2.5% of that 4.9%, or slightly more than half of it. We are asking and have had conversations with the PERS director to the PERS board of collaring an additional 1.9%, so that agencies will not see, school districts will not see, cities and counties and special districts will not see any increase higher than what they would have had under the governor's recommended budget and his reforms to PERS.
The strategies for future adjustments should things happen in the courts with the PERS issue or whatever Congress does to us. We're maintaining a supplemental ending balance similar to the one we did in the last budget. We're going to hold back 2% of the second-year budgets for all agencies, with the exception of the state school fund and with the exception of debt service in the budget. We'll hold that back till February of 2014. In 2014, if we are still on course with the revenue projections and still being able to deal with whatever Congress does, we'll be able to release those dollars to those agencies to complete their second year of funding for the budget. In addition, our budget assumes $246 million in the rainy day fund, $185 million in the education stability fund, an ending balance of $130 million and $20 million in the e-board, totaling over $582 million in reserves, both for this budget if the need should arise, but also for future budgets pending what happens with PERS and other things in the economy.
In terms of savings and reductions in tax expenditures, we are going to be dependent upon the House and Senate revenue committees to develop proposals that will include ending or reducing specific corporate and individual tax expenditures and deductions. It's not in my script here, but I will share with you something that has become quite apparent to the co-chairs over the last several years. We should treat our tax expenditures and our deductions the same way as we treat our expenditures, our direct expenditures. We should look at what benefits they are providing. We should look at particularly when that they are trying to address shortcoming in our tax system for the needs of people, like individuals that have children, things like that. But we should be very careful with our tax expenditures, because additional credits are actually dollars being lost that will not be available for schools, will not be available for public safety, and will not be available to meet Oregon's most vulnerable. So we're awaiting the work of those two committees, and they are critical to us being able to balance this budget.
So in a nutshell, we summarize here, we were asking about $455 million in PERS reform. We're asking for about $275 million in tax expenditure reform. And we're asking our subcommittees to reach somewhere between $150 and $200 million in overall reductions to the state budget. That's how we balance this out. We understand that's going to be a challenge for our colleagues, but we believe that by doing so, we can fund K-12 at the level that we're offering. We can get that done early. We can get it done late March, early April if there's an agreement on PERS and agreement on tax expenditures. In fact, we encourage the legislature to do that step as the first major budget. In addition, there are a number of areas of concern that we can, if we meet these goals, we can increase funding, not in a hugely significant way, but any funding is significant for the following programs that we're listing. We received a lot of feedback from our colleagues and from advocates. They're concerned to increase support for the Community College Support Fund. For children's mental health, the Judicial Department, even in our budget, is below their current service level. We want to make sure they can get back to their current service level. Home care workers in our state have not had a raise since 2008. They're still working for $10.20 an hour. Many of them do not have health care. We'd like to address that. The earned income tax credit expansion that the governor proposed is something that's supported by a good number of our colleagues. We'd like to do that expansion if we can meet our revenue targets. Career and technical education is a goal for many in the legislature. Farm to school is as well. The OHSU Rural Scholars Program, more the tobacco prevention programs. We did get the tobacco master settlement dollars. We'd like to be able to use some of those for tobacco prevention. If we can meet our revenue goals, we'll be able to do that. We also are concerned about the mandated physical education programs, which we both support in K-12, and our revenue goal will help us address that mandate should we be able to reach the PERS goal, the revenue goal, and the reductions goal. And in addition, the Lebanon Veterans Home request has come in to help with the cost of finishing the construction of that facility. So with that, we've done the state budget in 20 minutes, and now we are open for questions.
Let me ask you about two simple numbers, 16 and 31. I know it's early, but do you think there's enough support in this building to
Well, I think that the document that you see before you will have wording in it that's fairly clear. Both the revenue issues in terms of tax expenditures and the PERS issues in terms of reforms don't have entirely clear paths in this session. But we want to make it absolutely clear to the public, to the business community, and to the members of the legislature that this budget doesn't work without both. We will need both for this budget to be actually able to come together.
Peter, in a certain sense, we've been referring to this budget, too, as calling the question. Many of us ran for legislature saying that we'll do everything possible to make sure our kids have the education that they need, and it's time to call the question on that. As we recover from the recession, we have to get it done. We're also going to call the question on the COLA on PERS. Is it legal? Is it not legal? Let's call the question on that. Let's see what steps we can take in PERS funding. And the same with tax expenditures as well. Again, we all talk about how important our schools are to us. The co-chair and I have tried to present to the legislature a pathway. Here is a way we can get to where we've all said we want to be. Are you willing to do it? Tough votes for Democrats, tough votes for Republicans. We believe we're capable of getting it done.
Natural resources seem to be well taken care of in this budget. I'm wondering, can you give me the logic behind that?
Go ahead, Richard.
Natural resources is facing a lot of challenges, as they always have. I'm going to get too technical here. But
I'll take a break.
We have been utilizing in previous budgets funds that are called Pacific Coastal Salmon funds that come from the federal government. We cannot utilize those in the same way. We had been using some funds in slightly different ways before the passage of Measure 77. We cannot do those the same way. The federal government has not lessened any of its requirements for the Department of Environmental Quality, but it's continuing to provide less in federal funds to actually meet those requirements.
Correct.
And probably will even provide less when we hear what the sequestration is going to do to those funds. So we felt that we had to shore up those programs. The programs are important for Oregon. They're important for Oregon's economy. And clearly, it's one of the areas of the budget, like education, that has been hit hardest in the last decade.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Can you go into a little more detail on the graduated COLA element? What does that mean?
Wait, it's I think the Senator mentioned, the PERS system can't take a graduated COLA adjustment on July 1st. We have to take this in two steps. First, we're going to have to do a cap at a certain level. There have been a number of proposals about where a cap could be that would impact the fewest number of low-income pensioners, and we're looking at that. Where would that cap be for the first year? Then, as the PERS system can adapt to a tiered COLA proposal, we're working with the PERS director and others to come up with what exactly that tiered approach would be that would get to our goal of $400 million.
And we're relatively close in terms of trying to figure out what that formula might be, but it's probably going to take us a couple more weeks to get to that point. One of the things in terms of that COLA is, as Representative Buckley, the co-chair, has indicated, is we can't implement a graduated COLA in the first year, and we can't wait either. So in the first year, we either have to put in a cap or put in across-the-board reduction of what the COLA is.
Right.
In the second year, we crucially need to do the graduated, because what we're being told is to have a chance for our adjustments in the COLA to prevail and be upheld by the Supreme Court. We are going to need a graduated formula to have a better chance. Some will criticize us for having a lower level, but it's very difficult to do graduated and not have a reduction from where other COLAs are. But the other thing is, higher levels that might appear better on paper mean nothing if they're not upheld by the Supreme Court.
You know, I can make just one more point on COLA. These aren't just numbers on a page. You know, these are people's lives. These are my next door neighbor. I always bring up, 70 years old, taught high school for 30 years in Jackson County. He's got a decent retirement. If I was to guess, he probably has about $40,000 a year in retirement. He gets to visit his grandkids. He lives in a house as small as my house. So when I think about COLA, I'm thinking about my next door neighbor. I'm thinking about the people I meet in my district. The teacher I met in Corvallis, who was paid so little when she started. She was on food stamps with her family when she first started out teaching about 25 years ago. And teachers have made sacrifices, workers have made sacrifices. This is not just numbers on a page. When people talk about PERS reform, we're talking about people, we're talking about their retirement, people on fixed income. So we take this very seriously. If this wasn't a absolute crisis in education, we wouldn't be taking this step, in my view. We need to take a step to stabilize the PERS system, but also to make sure we give the next generation a chance as well. I think many retirees are supportive of this, but at the same time, we have to be very conscious what we're doing is that we're asking people for literally hundreds a year, thousands, tens of thousands of what they expected in their retirement over 20 or 30 years. So it's a very serious matter.
So to restate, to make sure I understand what you're doing, you're looking at doing a cap first in the first year, and then giving you time to design a graduated COLA of some time?
We're going to have a concrete proposal to put before the legislature that will include that. Our fundamental problem, which you've always heard before, is we have relatively antiquated data systems in this state. For PERS to be able to put in place a graduated COLA, they need about 6 months to a year to do the software modifications that they need to do to be able to actually implement that.
But starting the second year, there would no longer be a firm cap, it would be graduated?
Yes, or some version that's graduated.
Okay. And where are you looking at the cap in the first year?
It's the debate. It's a debate between an absolute cap or a reduction in the percentage. We actually are looking, at how much the savings are, what the impact is on individuals within that. We are actually looking at how it will ultimately be viewed by the court if we do a cap versus if we do a percentage. We're basically trying to do what is both equitable and what will be upheld by the Supreme Court. We're taking the challenges of the rising costs in PERS very seriously, but we're also understanding clearly, as I can, my co-chair doesn't like the word concur.
He says concur all the time. He's concur. Concur. What is that?
All the statements the co-chair has made about the actual impact on real people, I concur with, because they do actually have real impact. He's the poet, I'm the mathematician, accountant, and actuary.
When you talk about cuts that you're looking for your subcommittees to do, are you talking about actual cuts below current spending levels?
No.
Or are you talking, so
No.
you're talking about
Cuts from the governor's
reductions in
budget.
what they would like? So in other words, they wouldn't get as much money, but they would still get more.
Right.
Yeah, I would say what they would like is an interesting way to frame it. What they need in order to maintain their current level of services is where it was one of the markers. The governor's budget is another marker. The governor put several agencies above that current service level, and we will need to pull this back down towards current service level. The sub will recommend in some areas to go below the current service level to try to push additional savings from agencies.
And I think these people should remember that the current service level included the increases in PERS costs, and we're addressing that increase. So the current service level is coming down. When we talk to our subcommittee chairs and the members of the subcommittee, we will be talking about additions and reductions from the governor's recommended budget. That's our basic point.
Could you explain that collar point that you made about what the PERS board would collar?
The senator would be glad to spend about 7 hours with you to go
Yeah.
over this in detail.
The PERS board, within their existing policies that govern the PERS board, have the ability to collar rates when they believe the rates, if they impose them all at one time, would have too serious an impact on the delivery of services. So we are asking them to collar 1.9% of the 4.9% that PERS rates would increase actually if we did nothing.
And that gets you to your 455 million?
The
Or
co-
is that
the-
above and beyond that?
No,
That's above. It's
That's
beyond that.
above and beyond that.
That's what gets us closer to the governor's $865 million PERS.
Correct.
That's what covers that gap.
Right.
It's
Right.
not the reduction.
The COLA and the out-of-state are 455, and then the collaring is the other approximately 350 or so.
One thing, if I might mention, and the co-chair will remind you that I talk for a long time when I do these, but they're a little complicated. One of the things that we tell brand new Ways and Means member is do not get too attached to specific numbers. The only number that we're really attached to in this budget is meeting $6,750 million in support for the state school fund. All expenditures are estimates, all revenue are estimates. When you change something in PERS, it operates in a different fashion than almost everything you could imagine because they won't match. You put something in one area and it will have a different impact than you thought it would. So we're going to get numbers that float back and forth from PERS. And we're putting proposals forward, but they ultimately will take those proposals and actually give them to their actuaries. They're doing estimates to do the actual work. And we won't know the actual savings until we actually get those estimates from their actuary.
Now, do you have a game plan for how this comes together? Is it like pass the school budget first, then get PERS reforms done, or pass PERS
You're at a
reforms
level
first?
higher
then-
than us.
Our suggestion to the presiding officers and the legislators as a whole is that we do it all together. That we
All
do
one
it.
big-
We do it. Let's get this very difficult part done in late March, early April. Pass K-12 budget, pass PERS reform, pass tax expenditure reform. Let's walk together to get that done. I think that'd be great for the state and for the rest of the work on the budget. That would actually give us tremendous momentum to complete the budget in a positive manner.
Let me ask one question about the mental health. The governor's proposed $18 million roughly to expand mostly children and adolescents program. The Senate president has advocated $46 million. Can you clarify what your proposal does to those?
Well, we all know that the state hospital would clearly be the embarrassment it was for the state if it hadn't been for the Senate president. The Senate president is very worried about mental health services very broadly and their status in this state at all levels. And he probably will be continuing to work on mental health issues, I would guess, as long as he is here. Mm-hmm. But he is a very seasoned and very capable individual, and he looks at what he can do at this stage, and he has told me that what he most wants to address is children's and young adults' mental health needs in this biennium, which is at a higher level that you just indicated to address it where he would feel adequately. But we are looking for ways to get closer to that number because the co-chairs, I believe it's a very worthwhile effort also.
And I think you all should mention to Senator Courtney, the Senator Devlin, refer to him as seasoned next time you talk to him.
Guys, we've got to get Richard upstairs, Senator Devlin upstairs for
I'll take the top from it.
the bridge.
Oh, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.